The pounding on my door shook the walls, each thud like a heartbeat in the dead of night. 4 men in dark uniforms stood outside, guns gleaming under my porch light, claiming they had a warrant for my wife. Oakwood Heights, our quiet suburban haven, felt like a crime scene. I froze, pulse racing, as their cold eyes demanded compliance. No paperwork, no badges, just threats. Then soft footsteps behind me. My wife stepped forward, her sheriff's uniform catching the light. Their faces changed. Who were these men? Why target us? What happens when a neighborhood's rules turn into a dangerous game? You won't believe what unfolded next. The sun dipped low over Oakwood Heights, casting golden streaks across manicured lawns and white picket fences. My wife Sarah and I had called this place home for 5 years. Our 2-story brick house with its creaky porch swing and flower boxes was our sanctuary. I'd sip coffee in the mornings, watching kids pedal bikes down the street, their laughter mixing with the hum of sprinklers. Sarah, always up before dawn, would adjust her sheriff's badge in the hall mirror, her uniform crisp, her smile steady. She was the county's youngest sheriff, a fact that made neighbors nod with pride. Oakwood Heights wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a community. Or so I thought. Mornings were predictable. I'd wave to Mr. Jenkins, who'd fuss over his rose bushes, muttering about aphids. Mrs. Parker, in her curlers, would shuffle out to grab her paper, tossing me a quick smile. The mail carrier, Tom, always had a story about someone's dog chasing him down Laurel Avenue. It was small-town life stitched together by routine. Sarah and I fit right in grilling burgers for block parties, signing petitions for new playground equipment. But beneath the surface, something simmered. The HOA, led by Gregory Allen, ruled with an iron grip. His newsletters arrived like clockwork, citing rules about grass height, mailbox colors, even holiday lights. Most folks grumbled but complied. Nobody wanted a fine taped to their door. Sarah, though, wasn't one to bend. Her sheriff's instincts made her question authority, especially when it felt petty. Last summer, Gregory sent a notice about our shed's paint too faded, he claimed. Sarah repainted it herself, but not before mailing him a copy of the county code proving our shed was legal. He backed off, but his eyes lingered on our house at every HOA meeting. I noticed the way he clutched his clipboard, lips tight, like he was tallying a score. I shrugged it off. Sarah didn't. He's testing us, she'd say, her voice low, her gaze sharp. I thought she was overthinking it. Oakwood Heights was peaceful. What could go wrong? The first notice arrived on a Tuesday, stuck to our front door with a strip of tape so aggressive it left a sticky scar on the paint. I peeled it off, the paper crinkling in my hand, and read the bold red letters, Violation, Unauthorized Exterior Modification. The HOA claimed our porch swing, a gift from Sarah's dad, was non-compliant with community aesthetics. A $200 fine, due in 10 days, or further action would be taken. I stood there, the morning sun warming my neck, and felt a prickle of irritation. Sarah, adjusting her sheriff's badge inside, glanced at the notice and snorted. "They're nitpicking now," she said, her voice calm but edged with steel. I figured it was just Gregory Allen flexing his clipboard again. We'd pay the fine, move on. But deep down, I sensed this was only the beginning. A week later, another notice appeared. This time, it was about our mailbox. Apparently, the shade of blue was one tone off the approved palette. Another $150 fine. I stood on the lawn, staring at the mailbox we'd painted 2 years ago without a whisper of complaint. Across the street, Mr. Jenkins trimmed his hedges, his eyes darting toward our house. Mrs. Parker lingered on her porch, pretending to water her geraniums but clearly watching. The neighborhood's rhythm felt off, like a song stuck on the wrong note. Sarah tore the notice down, her jaw tight. "They're targeting us," she said, crumpling the paper. I wanted to argue, to say it was just bureaucracy gone wild, but the way Gregory had stared at her during the last HOA meeting, his lips twitching like he was holding back a smirk, made me pause. Why us? Why now? The fines kept coming, each one pettier than the last. Our driveway had unauthorized cracks, 300. Our front yard tree was 2 inches too close to the sidewalk, $250. One notice even claimed our welcome mat was excessively bold, 100. In 3 weeks, we were drowning in $200 worth of fines, each taped to our door like a public shaming. I'd come home from work to find Sarah at the kitchen table, her sheriff's hat beside her, sorting through the notices like evidence in a case. Her fingers traced the HOA's letterhead, her eyes narrowing at the tiny logo of two overlapping houses. "This isn't about rules," she said one night, her voice low. "It's about control." I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Oakwood Heights, once our haven, was starting to feel like a trap. The harassment didn't stop at paper. One evening, a black SUV idled across from our house, its tinted windows reflecting the streetlights. I noticed it while taking out the trash, the engine humming softly, no driver visible. It sat there for an hour, then drove off. The next night it was back. Sarah stood at our window, her silhouette sharp against the blinds, watching it. "Private security," she muttered, her hand resting on her radio. I laughed it off, trying to lighten the mood, but my pulse quickened. The SUV appeared 3 more nights, always parked just close enough to be noticed. Neighbors started whispering. Mr. Jenkins mentioned seeing strange men measuring lawns at dusk. Mrs. Parker said she'd gotten a call from an unknown number, warning her to keep her yard in line. The air in Oakwood Heights grew heavy, like a storm was brewing. Then came the community meeting. The HOA clubhouse was packed, folding chairs creaking under restless neighbors. Gregory stood at the front, his golf shirt tucked too tightly, his clipboard gleaming like a badge of honor. He announced new compliance measures to protect property values. His voice was smooth, practiced, but his eyes kept flicking to Sarah, who sat in the back, her sheriff's uniform drawing every gaze. The new rules were absurd. No outdoor decorations without board approval, mandatory lawn inspections every Saturday, and a community safety initiative that involved hiring external enforcement officers. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Someone asked about the cost. Gregory waved it off, saying dues would cover it. Sarah's hand tightened on her chair's armrest. I could feel her calculating, piecing together a puzzle I couldn't yet see. When she raised her hand to ask who these officers were, Gregory's smile faltered. "Reputable professionals," he said curtly, then moved on. The room felt smaller, the air thicker. What was he hiding? The next morning, our lawn was vandalized. Spray paint slashed across our grass in jagged red lines. "Comply or leave." I stood there, coffee mug trembling in my hand, the words burning into my eyes. Sarah crouched beside the damage, her fingers brushing the ruined sod. "This isn't kids," she said, her voice steady but cold. "This is a message." Neighbors gathered. Phones out, snapping pictures. Mrs. Parker gasped, clutching her robe. Mr. Jenkins muttered about Gregory's goons. The HOA sent no notice this time, no fine, just silence. That silence was louder than any letter. Sarah called her deputies to file a report, but I could see the fire in her eyes. She wasn't just a homeowner anymore. She was a sheriff smelling a crime. The intimidation grew bolder. One afternoon, I found a man in a dark jacket standing in our driveway taking photos of our house. He wore no badge, no uniform, just a ball cap pulled low. When I asked who he was, he muttered something about compliance checks and walked off, disappearing into a sedan that sped away. Sarah ran the plates through her system, unregistered. That night, she sat me down, her badge glinting under the kitchen light. "Community Security Solutions," she said, sliding a printout across the table. "A private firm out of Houston. They're linked to HOAs in 3 states, all with complaints of harassment and fake fines." My heart sank. The SUV, the vandalism, the officers, it was all connected. But why target us? What had we done to earn this? The answer came in a late-night email from an anonymous sender. The subject line read, "You're not alone." Attached was a scanned contract between the HOA and Community Security Solutions, signed by Gregory Allen. It detailed enforcement services for Oakwood Heights, including resident compliance monitoring and targeted interventions. Our address was listed under priority cases. Sarah's eyes burned as she read it aloud. "They're not just after us," she said. "They're testing how far they can push before someone fights back." The knot in my stomach tightened. Oakwood Heights wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a battlefield. And we were in the crosshairs. The next week, the HOA doubled down. A new notice demanded we remove our porch swing entirely, claiming it obstructed public view. The fine was now $500, with a warning of legal action if unpaid. Sarah tore it down, her hands steady but her face like stone. She didn't speak, but I knew that look. She was done playing defense. That night, she stayed up late, her laptop glowing, digging into community security solutions. She found lawsuits in Dallas, complaints in Baton Rouge, a pattern of intimidation dressed up as neighborhood safety. Each case started small. Fines, notices, strange men in unmarked cars, then escalated to evictions or worse. My blood ran cold. Were we next? The tension snapped one Saturday morning. I woke to the sound of boots on our porch, heavy and deliberate. Peering through the blinds, I saw 4 men in dark blue uniforms, sunglasses hiding their eyes, hands on holsters. They weren't deputies. Sarah's team wore tan. These men looked like they'd stepped out of a movie, all sharp edges and menace. One held a folded paper, waving it like a weapon. My heart pounded as I called for Sarah. She appeared, still in her pajamas, her sheriff's instincts kicking in. "Stay calm," she whispered, her hand brushing her badge on the counter. The pounding grew louder, the men's voices barking my name. Oakwood Heights, our quiet refuge, was about to explode. The pounding on the door shattered the morning calm, each blow echoing through the house like a declaration of war. I yanked it open, my heart slamming against my ribs, and there they stood, 4 men in dark blue uniforms, sunglasses masking their eyes, pistols drawn and glinting in the sunlight. Their stances were rigid, shoulders squared like they owned the porch, the lawn, the entire street. The leader, square-jawed and unyielding, thrust a folded paper forward, his voice slicing through the air with authority that felt too rehearsed. No badges visible, no nameplates, just the raw threat of metal and menace. Oakwood Heights, our once serene bubble, had cracked open into something nightmarish. I stood frozen, the blood roaring in my ears as the leader barked his demand. My wife arrested? The word hung heavy, absurd against the backdrop of sprinklers hissing and distant dogs barking. Sarah's footsteps approached from behind, soft but deliberate, her presence a quiet anchor in the storm. She stepped into view, not in pajamas, but slipping into her sheriff's uniform mid-stride, the silver badge catching the light like a beacon. The men's postures shifted instantly, a subtle tilt, a grip loosening on a holster, as doubt flickered across their faces. One cleared his throat, another averted his gaze, the facade cracking under her steady stare. The air thickened, charged with unspoken questions. Who were these intruders? What gave them the nerve? Sarah didn't flinch. She pressed her radio, her movements precise, her voice cutting through their bluster without raising a decibel. The response crackled back almost immediately. Negative on any warrants, units en route. The color drained from the leader's face, his jaw clenching as the reality hit. These weren't officers. They were imposters, frauds in borrowed uniforms, and now the neighborhood watched. Curtains twitched across the street. Phones emerged from pockets. Mr. Jenkins leaning on his mailbox with his camera rolling. The quiet suburb transformed into a live stage, every eye on the unfolding drama. The men's confidence evaporated, replaced by uneasy shuffles and muttered exchanges. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder, real authority barreling toward us. But the imposters didn't back down easily. The leader raised his pistol higher, his voice hardening in a desperate bid to reclaim control. Sarah stood her ground, her badge a silent rebuke, the wind carrying the faint static of her radio. The tension coiled tighter, the morning sun beating down like a spotlight on their crumbling act. Neighbors gathered now, a loose crowd forming on sidewalks. Murmurs spreading like wildfire, fake imposters. Danger. Mrs. Parker clutched her robe, her phone held high, capturing every twitch and glare. The men glanced at each other, fingers twitching on triggers, weighing their options in the face of exposure. Fight or flee. The sirens screamed closer, tires screeching around the corner. Patrol cars screeched to a halt. Doors flying open as deputies in tan uniforms spilled out, weapons drawn, commands barking through the chaos. The imposters hesitated, caught in the flood of red and blue lights washing over the lawn. One dropped his gun with a clatter, surrender ringing out like a defeat. The others followed, metal hitting concrete in a symphony of failure. Sarah directed the scene with unshakable calm, her presence commanding the deputies without a word. The crowd swelled, phones multiplying, the neighborhood's collective breath held as the truth unraveled. These men weren't random, they were hired, pawns in a larger game. And then Gregory Allen appeared, striding up the sidewalk with his clipboard clutched like a shield, his face flushed and breathing ragged. The HOA president, the man who'd orchestrated our fines and shadows, marched into the fray, his voice rising in outrage. This was official business, he claimed, compliance officers enforcing rules we'd ignored. The words landed like a slap, igniting the crowd. Sarah turned slowly, her eyes locking onto him, the forged paper from the imposters now in her hand. She held it up, the sunlight revealing the HOA's logo stamped at the bottom, a damning link. Gregory's bluster faltered, his face blotching as sweat beaded on his brow. The absurdity hit peak. The man who'd fined us for mailbox shades had hired armed frauds to drag my wife away. The crowd's murmurs turned to shouts, anger boiling over as phones captured Gregory's every stammer. He tried to backpedal, waving his clipboard, insisting it was all a misunderstanding, but the evidence was ironclad. Invoices from his own files, pulled by deputies on the spot, showed payments to community security solutions. Tens of thousands from HOA dues funneled into this scheme. Neighbors gasped, pieces clicking into place. The vandalism, the unmarked SUVs, the escalating threats. It wasn't just us. It was the whole community, bled dry to fund Gregory's power trip. Sarah stepped forward, the forged warrant in an evidence bag, her movements deliberate as she confronted him. The air crackled with vindication, the unfairness of it all, the petty rules masking a criminal underbelly, fueling a fire that had smoldered for years. But the peak shattered when one imposter lunged. The scarred man, wrists cuffed loosely in front, broke free with a guttural surge, charging at Sarah like a cornered animal. The crowd inhaled sharply, time slowing as his cuffed hands swung like a makeshift weapon, aiming for her. I felt my world tilt, helplessness crashing over me as he bellowed his fury. Sarah pivoted, her training kicking in like instinct, catching his arm mid-swing and twisting with precision. A crack echoed, bone giving way, and he crumpled to the porch, face down, her knee pinning him as deputies swarmed. The neighborhood erupted, cheers mixing with gasps, phones shaking in excited hands. Gregory shrank back, his clipboard sagging, the humiliation complete as his hired thug writhed in defeat. The deputies secured the scene, hauling the imposters into cruisers, their fake uniforms now badges of shame. Gregory stood exposed, the crowd closing in, voices demanding answers. How many fines were fake? How much money pocketed? The pettiness of his reign, the absurd rules, the endless notices, laid bare as criminal. Sarah held the evidence high, her badge gleaming brighter than ever, the turning point crystallizing. This wasn't just a dispute. It was a takedown. The frustration we'd bottled for months boiled into triumph, the air electric with justice. Neighbors who'd once cowered now stood tall, their eyes burning holes through Gregory. He muttered excuses, but they drowned in the roar of sirens and shouts. The cruisers peeled away from our curb, their lights fading into the distance, leaving Oakwood Heights bathed in an uneasy hush. The imposters were gone, shackled and silent in the back seats, their fake uniforms now evidence tags in a growing case file. Gregory Allen stood at the edge of the chaos, his clipboard dangling limp from his hand, his once authoritative posture, reduced to a slouch under the weight of 100 accusing stares. The crowd lingered, neighbors clustering on sidewalks, their phones still glowing as videos uploaded in real time, turning our front yard skirmish into a viral testament. Sarah remained on the porch, her sheriff's badge a steady gleam, her expression unreadable but resolute. The air still hummed with adrenaline, the scent of burnt rubber from screeching tires mixing with the faint ozone of impending rain. In that moment, the tide had turned. But the real cleanup was just beginning. Deputies cordoned off the street, yellow tape fluttering like cautionary flags, while forensic teams combed the imposter's abandoned vehicle for prints and traces. Sarah coordinated with precision, her radio crackling with updates as the DA's office was looped in. The forged warrant, that damning sheet with the HOA's logo smirking at the bottom, was sealed in an evidence bag and whisked away for analysis. Gregory tried to slink back to his house, but a deputy's hand on his shoulder stopped him cold. He wasn't arrested, not yet, but the questions came fast and unrelenting. Invoices from his clipboard spilled the truth. HOA dues siphoned into Community Security Solutions, a shadowy firm peddling intimidation as enforcement. Tens of thousands funneled over months, all under Gregory's signature. The pettiness of it burned. The same man who'd fined Mrs. Parker for her flagpole had bankrolled armed frauds to silence dissent. By evening, the neighborhood clubhouse overflowed with residents, the usual half-empty seats now crammed with bodies fueled by outrage. The air was thick with the smell of stale coffee and heated whispers, folding chairs scraping as people shifted restlessly. Sarah addressed the group from the front, her uniform a symbol of reclaimed authority, laying out the facts without flourish. The contract with CSS, the pattern of harassment in other states, the way Gregory had targeted our home as a priority case. Murmurs turned to gasps, then to shouts. Mr. Jenkins, his voice gravelly from years of rosebush battles, stood first, demanding Gregory's immediate removal. Hands shot up like a wave, the vote unanimous in its fury. Gregory sat at the board table, his face ashen, his excuses swallowed by the roar. In one swift motion, the HOA presidency slipped from his grasp. The clipboard, his scepter of control, confiscated as potential evidence. He left the meeting escorted by deputies, his steps heavy, the door slamming behind him like a final punctuation on his reign.